what's been a challenge for me is often I'm like the only woman in the room.
Right.
Or I was shortlisted in a program in the top 10 that got investment, and I was the only female CEO out of 10 companies in Malaysia. This is all in Malaysia. And, you know, I've had men say comments to me like, Amy, tak nak duduk kat rumah ke? You know, like, yes, I'm a mother of 3 children. And I think at the time I was literally holding it, like I was in a village, like holding one of my kids, and he's like, you don't want to stay at home? I'm like, I'm here with my kids. Like, what do you mean?
This is Preti, and you're listening to Millennials Boleh, the show which is all about millennials. Hi listeners, welcome to this week's episode of Millennials Boleh. Our topic for this week is Millennials Boleh wear batik. Today on the show, we have Amy Blair, who is the founder and CEO of the Batik Boutique. Welcome, Amy. How are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you here, Amy, with us. And I think we've got lots of themes that will hopefully come out of this podcast, you know, female entrepreneurship, local businesses, lots of things here that is really, I think would be really beneficial for our listeners. So to start us off, Amy, tell us your story. How did you end up in Malaysia? And how did, you know, what was the genesis of the Batik Boutique? Why Batik?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Texas in the United States, and I moved here about 14 years ago, long time ago, when I was kind of like, had just graduated from college, university, and had been working a few years. And I had this opportunity to come work in tourism. So I lived in Penang, and I was newly married and no children. So it seemed like a fun idea at the time, as many people would love that opportunity to go live on an island and get paid to travel, you know, when you're kind of young and free. So I came here for 2 years thinking it was just like a contract that I would just have this experience. And I had been traveling a lot. That was something that I value, that my parents actually exposed me to when I was younger. So I love other cultures. I love, that's my degree, is communication and tourism. So I love like experiencing new things and people. So it was amazing to be in Malaysia, where there's just, it's like a melting pot of, you know, different cultures and people and food. So fast forward, I noticed in the tourism industry where I was working that I couldn't find a quality made gift or souvenir at the time to like send back home to family and friends at holidays or birthdays. And I never understood why, because when I traveled to other countries in the region, say Indonesia or Thailand, I thought that they had like local artisans working. So I went on this journey. I thought at first maybe we don't have these artisans here or something, but turns out we have a lot of them. They're in villages, a lot of times on the East Coast. And so I just went on this journey to try to understand, like, what's the issue? Why do we not have it? Is there something anyone can do about it? Then a few years later, we moved to Kuala Lumpur, to the capital, where my husband was working. And I met this group of women who lived in the PPR flats, which is the low income housing. And they were basically mothers. And at the time I was a new mother myself, who needed to earn income for their families, and they didn't have transportation or childcare. So I understood these issues as a mom now, like how difficult it is to need to be able to, you know, provide and have income, but also need to take care of your kids and family when they're young. So long story short, we tried a few things like baking and cooking and catering and stuff. And turns out they had a few sewing machines, and I kind of merged what I knew from tourism mixed with what they could do, the skill set they had, which was sew. And we incorporated batik because I was looking for something Malaysian at the time. So that's the really simplified version of how we got started, was out of friendship and of a need in the market, and just seeing what I could do to help out.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting story, Amy, because you sort of had a problem at the start of it in a way, and then you sort of went along to find the solution, and then in a sense there were sort of, you realized there would probably be more problems that sort of existed in.
Oh yeah, I didn't know how many problems there really were until I got involved, you know.
Absolutely. And I guess that leads us on to sort of the aspect of your business being a social enterprise. Mm-hmm. So how did you create a business model that would allow for the makers to be fairly compensated for what they produced, basically?
Yeah, so I knew that if I was going to start something, I wanted it to have meaning. a bit of a millennial kind of idea, right? Like if I'm going to do, especially living on the other side of the world, you know, I didn't want just another job at that point. I was here for, you know, more meaningful things. So I knew I wanted to be about the people. That was important to me. That's just in my DNA. So I worked very closely with the women from the flats. I mean, I've been over there so many times, and my kids and everybody. I went out to villages to meet the makers, to try to find, and this, I mean, this was before like Waze even existed. So imagine, you know, even a GPS, it was like a random taxi driver. And I even tried to learn Malay so that I could try to communicate like at least directions and, you know, where I want to go and what I want to eat and stuff like that. So yeah, I went from grassroots level, and I think that's the way you have to start if you want to make impact. I went to the people, I asked a lot of questions. I tried to understand versus try to solve problems, which is a bit difficult if you want to stereotype Americans, I guess. But I tried to listen to see, you know, what it is that people really wanted help with and how they wanted to be helped. And also like, what were the issues, and just over time, like little by little, try to solve parts of those that I thought we could. There's other things along the way that I've had to let go of, obviously, like we can't, you know, solve every issue for everybody, right? But it was more, I kept a focus on what are they saying is the issue, what do they want to solve, and what parts can we really do something about? Like what, as opposed to like, I think it's easy to think what I can't do. You know, you often feel like, oh, I can't do anything about that. So I really have tried to train my mind. I know we can't do everything about everything, right? But there's something we can do. So what is that at the moment? And that's how I kind of move forward.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I wonder if you know, amongst the women that you met, I'm sure you've met lots of women in that area that you talked about. Was there a particular person that you felt very connected to with their story and where they came from and sort of their journey with Batik?
Yeah, one lady actually still works with us now. Her name's Cottonor. And when I met her, she had 5 kids. Now she has 7. So I always joke with her that she should have named them like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, had one for every day of the week. But she's really special to me because at the time I was helping her and one other woman, and I was doing it more like a charity kind of hobby thing on the side. But her story is really what motivated me to pull back and to really think through the business side, to think through establishing a company and you know, figuring out how to pay and how to grow and how to have sustainability for them. Because her story, you know, I have 3 kids. I had 2 at the time, and I could barely figure out with 2 kids and like a part-time cleaner and all these things that I had resources for. I could barely figure out like how to get things done, you know, in my day. And here was this woman living in a, you know, 1-bedroom flat with 5 children, and she was wanting to work. And I just was blown away by her work ethic and her heart. And I realized that actually, end of the day, we might look different, speak different, wear different clothes, you know, eat different food, but we're women and we're mothers. We want the same things in life. And so her story is always like, really, to this day, it still inspires me. And she still even works with us too now.
Oh, yeah. That's really inspiring. And I think, you know, lots of our listeners who are listening in, I think this could really be, you know, they might know someone like this. They might be someone that's experiencing this, you know, sort of, you know, just going through everyday life and trying to make an impact in some way and, you know, hoping to make a genuine income from that as well. Yeah, that's really beautiful, Amy. And so if you talk about Batik and then we talk about millennials, how do you think your brand could appeal to Malaysian millennials?
Well, basically, I hire pretty much only Malaysian millennials in my office, it seems like, in our team, which is helping me define that. And I think Malaysian millennials, like, and millennials in general, globally, you know, and when it comes to fashion, accessories, products, things we want to purchase, consumers, I think that millennials are not satisfied anymore with just mainstream. And, you know, millennials ask questions and they want to know why, and they want to have meaning and significance. And I think we can appeal to millennials by giving them a product that actually has a purpose and a story to it. And that hopefully with Malaysian millennials in particular, we're really trying to have people appreciate what is theirs. I think Malaysians have come a long way in the past years. I mean, I've been doing this for about 10 years now. And I would say at first, the concept of shop local, buy artisan made, which people just looked at me here locally like, why? You know, we want imported everything, right? But I slowly see that changing. And I think millennials have a real strong power there to do something good. with your purchasing, to wear your story, to wear your impact, to know that, you know, that even the type fabric that you're buying and all can actually make a difference in someone's life. I think that's really meaningful. And hopefully we can help educate Malaysian millennials to be proud of where they come from and proud of their cultural heritage. I think that's something I feel really hopeful for.
Yeah, no, and that's really, if I could add something to this as well, you know, being a millennial myself and being a Malaysian millennial, and you know, sort of my understanding of batik really came from, you know, my mother and my grandmother. So, you know, my mom is a civil servant. She's a language trainer in the civil service, and in the civil service, you wear batik every Thursday. So that was kind of something that that, you know, that is how you really sort of saw people wearing batik when it came to working women and, you know, empowered women wearing batik. So that was the kind of image that I got. But I would say that as a millennial, I wouldn't say that, you know, if I go out to my friends and stuff, that I would, you know, that we would talk about or wear batik clothes. But it was, you know, we had to sort of make an effort, in a sense, to see that this is something, like you said, it's ours, and we should appreciate it, value it, and in fact support the businesses that are, you know, sort of preserving our heritage in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So when we talk about batik as well, there's, you know, it is a traditional textile, and, you know, there are concerns as well sometimes that, you know, it might be in some ways on the brink of extinction, certain aspects of it. Like if you look at Indonesia, there's a kind of batik, when I was doing some research, it's called a Rifaya batik, and it's produced in Indonesia, but it's a very traditional form of design when it, to do with batik. So do you think, in your opinion, how do you think we can preserve the batik heritage? Is there something that we can do as Malaysians, as Malaysian millennials, or as people in general in Malaysia?
Yeah, I think as consumers, we don't often place enough value on the artistry that goes into making everyday items. So batik is so much bigger even than apparel, right? So if you check out our website and things, one of our top selling products is homeware, actually. So we're trying to create really fresh, inspiring, especially now we're all at home a lot more, right? Placemats and coasters and cushion covers and you know, things like that. In addition to, yes, we have shirts and things, but we're trying to bring in, you know, more minimalist designs that still show the art form, but maybe different colors, and, you know, less is more sometimes, and batik can get a bit busy. But I think we need to think through, like, when you wear batik or you know, use batik for any other product, you're actually like wearing art. Like, it's actually like wearing a piece of art. Someone hand painted that. It took days for them to make it. Yeah. And I think another way, and that we do here whenever we can, we're doing it virtually right now, but we will reopen later, is Malaysians can learn about the craft. We cater a lot to tourists coming in for workshops, for batik and shibori workshops in the past before COVID. And we'll do that again eventually one day. But I always kind of giggle when Malaysians come to the workshops, because they're sitting there like, you know, like, oh, I never knew it was like this. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I think learning about the craft, you know, sign up for one of our virtual classes. Every time someone comes into a workshop, we have our studio above our retail outlet for a reason, because as soon as they try it and they see how difficult it is, and they see how, you know, even mixing colors, not getting out of the lines, like blocking and being the right width every time, you know, they appreciate it so much more. They go down to our shop and they will happily buy and support. You know, the cost is not really the issue anymore, because they understand the complications behind it. So yeah, I think if we can understand that as Malaysians and own that, and then play a part in that, it's really cool, because that's how I feel like the world might eventually like learn and appreciate batik, is from Malaysians who would own it and be proud to share it, like share that I'm wearing a piece of art right now, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I guess to just take on that last point that you mentioned, do you think batik could be something that that sort of appeals internationally? So I guess we know it as a kind of design and a kind of textile that we use in the Southeast Asian region. But do you think that could be something that could, you know, appeal to a much larger consumer base?
Well, okay, I'll tell you that in 2020, Batik Boutique shipped e-commerce products to 38 countries.
That's amazing, because I think one of the ways that we can, you know, if we are to preserve the culture, I think not just within this region, but, you know, if we are to move further, like you said, and, you know, the statistic that you gave there is a real start, I think, when it comes to.
So they don't, some of our marketing, like if we're running ads, you know, or something, the issue is outside of like Australia and a bit the UK and all, but in this region for sure, people know batik. They know minimally it's a motif, you know, I mean, they know it's a process. They might not know the details, but they get the style, right? Because they've traveled to this area. Where we have to maybe use different wording is like in the US, Canada, you know, that side of the world, because they don't know the difference between, you know, screen printing, batik, digital printing, India, like they don't know. So we word it differently. We talk more about our sustainability or about environment or about artisan made, or, you know, there's just a different way to communicate it. Now our name is still Batik Boutique, so they'll learn along the way, but they might purchase or support because it's benefiting people, or it's artisan made, or it's eco something, you know, so they might be actually purchasing for that reason. But what we're doing is educating. The more they buy from us, the more, you know, they get familiar with this concept of batik.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really interesting way of doing it, actually. In fact, I think yeah, I think different cultures have different. Would you say as well, if I could add on to that, would you say that Malaysians purchase batik more for the design and the art, or do you think it's more for the social enterprise aspect of it?
Ooh. Malaysians, well, it depends which our demographic. The older Malaysians who are like, we sell a lot of men's shirts, and I'd say we sell them to maybe like 30 and above kind of thing a lot. I think they're buying because they're looking for a fresh new batik. They want a batik, right? Yeah, so I think that person, when it's something familiar, like as a apparel piece, I think they're buying it because Malaysians think batik, think apparel, like that's all that they think. When they're buying it for homewares and some of the different type products, you know, purses, bags, totes, we do, I don't know that they're, you know, Googling batik placemats, you know what I mean? I think they might catch the story, catch the design. And I think that's where the whole story comes into play. The artisan side of it, the impact side of it, like that. Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. And let's move on to a little bit about, you know, entrepreneurship and female entrepreneurship. So what are your thoughts on female entrepreneurship in Malaysia? And, you know, obviously you have obviously had a lot of experience working as a female entrepreneur in Malaysia, but having sort of been in the business and seeing other female entrepreneurs, do you think that, you know, there's a kind of culture when it comes to female entrepreneurship in Malaysia?
I think, you know, I don't have experience being an entrepreneur outside of Malaysia. I mean, I've done NGO work and I've worked for corporate, so outside of Malaysia. So I've really discovered myself as an entrepreneur here in Malaysia. And I think in terms of that, I think generally speaking, for entrepreneurship, especially anything related to tech or digital in Malaysia, there's a lot of support out there. I don't see them biased about men and women per se in the support offered, but I see as like, I'm normally, I'm not afraid to go after certain things, right? This is part of my DNA a bit, like in culture as well. So what's been a challenge for me is often I'm like the only woman in the room.
Right.
Or I was shortlisted in a program in the top 10 that got investment, and I was the only female CEO out of 10 companies in Malaysia. This is all in Malaysia. And, you know, I've had men say comments to me like, Amy, tak nak duduk kat rumah ke? You know, like, yes, I'm a mother of 3 children. And I think at the time I was literally holding it, like I was in a village, like holding one of my kids, and he's like, you don't want to stay at home? I'm like, yeah. I'm here with my kids. Like, what do you mean? So I think there's definitely some cultural issues. It's global though, if that makes sense. I think I've been a part of like Lean In organizations, and I'm vice president of this group called WGCKL, which is a Women for Global Impact, a change. And I think generally speaking, women still have a ways to go as entrepreneurs. We are a minority, but I think there's growing support. I will say that I've always felt like I work harder than my male counterparts. And I don't know if that's because I felt I needed to or that I just do, but I'm not afraid to do that, if that makes sense. So I've grown a lot in it. And I think it's challenging to, as a woman anywhere, to take a lead of something, you know? And we tend to, generally speaking, we self-doubt more than men do naturally, I think, right? We question or reserve, we want to protect and save and all this. So as an entrepreneur, you've got to really put yourself out there. You've got to be rejected. You've got to be told no. And that's a challenge. I mean, to guys as well, I think. But I think as women, we guys tend to somehow look like they know the part even when they don't. So I will say that I've discovered along the way in rooms, because I'm generally the only woman, that I'm like, okay, they actually don't know what they're talking about either. So it's fine. Like, just do your best, you know? So yeah, I think we have I think women in general still have a long way to go.
Yeah, no, I think that self-doubt thing is and I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of experiences that we've had as well, you know, because I think men have always, you know, if we talk about you know, the kind of culture that we have, men have always been the ones to start something, to, you know, to own something and to be, you know, a part of the big leagues. And I think we've always had to kind of squish our way through, and then I guess as a result of that, we tend to doubt. But I think when we, like, you know, you're a great example, when we do make it, I think it's incredible. It's like a big win for all of us in the community.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it's I think we really take a huge step forward in things like that. And a little bit about Batik as well. Would you say that, and this is my opinion, but I would like your opinion on this. Do you think that Batik is, you know, secretly feminist in nature?
If you do, tell me why. I'm curious to hear what your thought is.
So I would say that in a sense, I feel like the design of Batik and the kind of makers of Batik, right? And I'm not stereotyping here and saying that you don't make Batik, but I think the women that make it, there is a kind of pact that they have, you know, with Batik, and through the production of it, you also see women wearing Batik, and there's a kind of, you know, empowerment that I see where, you know, on the streets when I see women wearing Batik. And so that's the kind of impression that I get from the business and also from the culture itself. Would you agree to that in any way?
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely think a lot of the Malaysian batik designs are, you know, they're floral by nature. You know, often if they're chanting, the hand-drawn one, they're a bit feminine. They use a lot of, you know, colors that are feminine. Yeah, and I love it when I see people wearing it. I don't know that I would say it's more feminist. I do think it's very family oriented. So one thing that's interesting, if you're in a village anywhere, like on the East Coast, you know, where a lot of this batik is made, often what I love, it's like the entire family's involved. So batik printing with the blocks is very labor intensive. So often the men do that part, like it's the hot wax and it's hot. You know, you'll see a guy wearing a sarong and no shirt, you know, like 10 of them out in the village and just, you know, back and forth. But then what's cool, and maybe this is where you're pulling in from there too, often after the blocking is done, they put the fabric out on a stretcher. Often that's where the women come in. They do the painting a lot. And that's where probably you're seeing that expression of the feminist side, because that's who's painting it maybe then, and probably choosing the colors, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if it's another business, like several of our batik artist families, you know, their kids are involved or whatever too. And when they finish the processing, the men tend to process it because it's chemicals and hard work, again, labor, physical. Sometimes then the women would then sew it into like a kaftan or baju tidur or something that they would, or sarong that they normally would sell it for. So it is cool to me because it's like usually like whole families are involved in it. Yeah. So I like appreciate that part of it.
Yeah, that's a nice, I guess in a way there's a lot of workmanship, obviously with something like batik. It's a lot of workmanship goes into it. But yeah, like you said, it's almost like, and would you say that the people that you've met, that, you know, the makers of batik, has it sort of been passed down in that family? Or
Often, yeah. Like one guy we work with in Kelantan, he's third generation, another second generation. Yeah, that's pretty normal.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. What advice would you give to female entrepreneurs having sort of experience, you know, building this business from ground up? What advice would you give them?
I think don't be afraid to work hard.
Yeah.
I think, you know, this is a thing I really feel for like millennials and below, Gen Z and all this beyond that, my children as well, you know, like coming up now. So I'm like, I'm kind of like on the cusp of, I'm almost millennial and not quite the same time. So I can identify and understand because it was sort of part of my upbringing, but I also feel like I knew another side of the world before digital everything. And, you know, so I feel for millennials and below in that it's really, because I mean, I feel this, right? It's really a lot of pressure to not compare yourself all the time, you know, and we see obviously on our social media, we're all putting our best foot forward, you know, and if we're not, we're even trying to protect, like make sure, you know, that I'm normal and had a bad day too. I mean, even that's kind of, you know, but I think in business and in things like brands and people, influencers, these kind of people you can see digital on social media. It's so easy to get discouraged because a lot of my days are really normal. A lot of my days are not exciting. Yesterday was one of my most non-exciting days. I was exhausted by the time I went home. I was solving problems. I was writing paperwork. I was hardly talking to anyone. I was at the computer, and I was like joking. I was going to, take a photo of the glamorous life of a CEO, like sweating in inventory about stuff that's not even my job to do. I was just like, this is not what I thought I was doing nowadays,
Yeah.
But I think when you see somebody, doing really well, or like it's big brand, or they overnight, especially with digital marketing, they got these followers and these sales, and I'm over here like every day working on our e-commerce with our team, It's really easy to compare and to get frustrated and to get discouraged and to compare, all that. And I think that's the thing that I've practiced for several years that is to me really important is this concept of stay in your lane, meaning like you're running a race, you have a race marked out for you. It's got its own road and journey. Everyone's running their own race, right? And we're accountable end of the day for how we run our own race, okay? And live our life. So stay in your lane. Like if you're on a track, I'm not a runner by any means, but I mean, in theory, I understand this. You're not supposed to look around when you run a race. If you do, it slows you down. And often your competitors can get ahead of you when you're like staring at them, So I think my biggest advice is just stay in your lane, like run your race. Yes, you need mentors. You need lots of mentors. Surround yourself with people who are better than you about anything. That's my motto, like find people smarter, better, faster, whatever, stick with them. But this whole comparison thing and just realizing things that you're building, like a brand or a company, they do take time. They do, We only ship to 38 countries because I've been doing this for so many years already. We've produced over 1 million products as a company now. If you told me on day one that Noor, the lady I was talking to you about, who barely could sew a straight line, was going to be part of helping us, sew 1 million products in total, I would like, I didn't even have like a vision for that. Do you know what I mean? So all of these, it's easy to talk to me now and be like, whoa, and look back and say, wow, yeah, but you need to follow the last 10 years of my journey, along the story and see the tears and the loss and the hard work and the victories along the way. But it's everybody's living their story out. So if you want to be successful and you really want to make it somewhere, you got to work hard and you got to stay in your own lane.
Yeah, stay in your own lane, millennials. That's the big advice. That's the takeaway. Yeah, stay in your lane. And that's really interesting. And it's been amazing talking to you about millennials and you being a female entrepreneur. And there's lots of themes that came out of this in Batik heritage. Is there a myth that you have sort of noticed when it comes to millennials? Now, this is a question that I ask all my guests, and it's really interesting what they have to say. But what would you have to say? Is there one myth that you disagree with, or even if you agree with?
Yeah, I think the one that's challenged me a lot that I've had to process with my team and different people for different reasons, because it mostly has happened with millennials, is this concept of like work ethic. So I used to think millennials were like lazy and like, didn't like know how to work. That's where I was coming from, because I came from like, I've always worked hard. And I do think my generation and older understands that work is not meant to be the thing necessarily to like give you all meaning in your life, right? It's sort of bonus, and because you just have to do it as an adult. So I come from this sort of like, well, guys, we have to work, we're adults and we have to pay bills, and like, so, but over time, I've come to understand through just relationships in my team, that that's not the case. So that mindset I had is wrong. It's not that millennials are not hardworking. They don't have a poor work ethic. They need to understand the meaning and the impact behind it, and they need to be heard, and they need to be pulled out a bit. Like if you're a manager or a boss or somebody, and you've got a team of 30s, 20s and 30-year-olds, early 30s, then you really have to, I think, try to understand them, listen to their ideas, and draw them out a bit more. And so when we do that and we create, I've changed a lot of things that are small and maybe might seem insignificant to someone else, but I've made changes in our company and even just ways we communicate and operate and all because of this feedback, trying to create a space for millennials, because this is the next generation, and I value their creativity and their need for meaning and impact, which is a huge part of our brand, right? I really value that in them. and keeping me accountable. I have one girl who in my team who's constantly keeping me accountable about environmental sustainability, to the point where I'm like, okay, you know, but I've asked her to do that, right? And that's she's keeping me grounded as well. So I really value this, but we need to create environments and you know, like just communication processes, I think that understand and give some space for millennials to express themselves and they'll process along the way, you know, and also I've seen them change as well. Like some of my team is being more what I would call harder working, if you know what I'm saying, like now, because we've kind of gone through this process together where I think they're feeling understood and they understand how what they're doing in their work is adding meaning, even if it's maybe graphics, you know, or something that you're kind of like, how does me making this other flyer actually serve the cause, you know? So I think as they understand and develop in that, it goes both ways. So we can keep learning from each other.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think one thing, just to add on to what you said as well, I think as millennials, we do, just reflecting on myself as well, we want things, I think, quite quickly. And I think we need to, in a sense, realize that, you know, great things do take time, and, you know, there's lots of effort that that goes into play. Thank you so much, Amy, coming today and having a conversation with us about Batik and your business, being a female entrepreneur. It's really inspiring to see the work that you've done and, you know, the lives you've changed in that process as well. And it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, it's my privilege. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you. All right.